Following Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem in Mark's Gospel, we come across one of the most abused passages in the Gospel, the cleansing of the temple. It has been proof texted to defend why Christians are able to be angry or even violent. If Jesus did it, so should we. At the same time, it's also been used to explain why we don't have church bazaars or do fundraisers. Neither is at the heart of the story. In fact, one of the interesting pieces, if one looks at the story in context, is that it is bracketed by a story of a fig tree. Jesus and the disciples, following their stay in the suburbs overnight, are making their way back to Jerusalem. After an 8-mile hike, Jesus is hungry. He sees a fig tree, and he goes over to see if it's got any figs on it. But all he finds is leaves, because as we are told, it's the wrong season for figs. That's interesting. What's even more interesting, if not troubling, is that Jesus curses the fig tree. May you never bear fruit. What's that all about? Jesus and the disciples then head to the temple. Still hungry. They go to be fed. Not physically fed, but spiritually fed. I mean, that is why you go to the temple, why you go to church, to have your hunger satisfied, to have that relationship with God restored, fed, nourished. But instead, Jesus encounters a marketplace. Now, this is not unusual. This is the way the temple has worked for centuries. But it's not feeding. It's maintaining a ritual. Jesus starts to drive people out, flip tables, and forbid people from walking through the temple. As I said earlier, it's called the cleansing. I think it's more a cursing, particularly in the context of the fig tree story. Because when Jesus leaves the temple with the disciples, they're heading back down the road and they discover the fig tree. And the disciples point out, Jesus, you know that fig tree you cursed? It's dead. It has withered and died. Jesus says, don't you know that what you pray for happens? These things should be expected. But be careful how you use your prayers. You should not use them to condemn or for self-gratification or to get what you want. Your prayers should be for forgiveness, for restoring the relationship between you and God and you and your brother and sister. So be careful how you use prayer, because prayer is effective. So what's going on here? One of the great crises that Mark's community is dealing with is the destruction of the Jewish temple. What does this mean? It's kind of like 9/11. It turned the world for us upside down. And so the destruction of the temple literally turned Jerusalem upside down. How would they continue in relationship with God now that the temple is gone? And there's another question going on here that we managed to avoid or squash, I'm not sure which. Where was God in all of this? Was this supposed to happen? Was this inevitable? If we go back to the story of the temple and the fig tree, Jesus' cursing of the temple sets in motion events that will take some 40 years to actually transpire. But the temple will be no more. It has been cursed because it failed to be what it was meant to be, a house of prayer, where that relationship with God and with one another is fed and nourished, and where we can go with a reasonable expectation of being fed and rebuilt.